Hello, and welcome to the fifth in a series of thematic deep dive events for global MOU signatories. The goal of our series is to arm you with critical information, expertise, and tools to help you reach your zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicle goals. This session is being recorded, and it will be posted to the Drive to Zero website, with the exception of the question and answer session at the end of our event. The session will be under Chatham House rules. My name is Christoph Wolf. I'm the CEO of the Smart Freight Center. This is a global NGO based in Amsterdam that has established the emission accounting framework for the freight sectors across all modes. And this is endorsed by SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and it's currently being converted into the ISO standard. Now, let's go first over a few housekeeping rules. Now, before we do that, I would want to welcome our new global MOU signatory nations. So we were a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we were all together at the COP in Egypt. And we had a great event in a similar configuration, and we could actually already celebrate that some of these actually came out just in time for the COP. So congratulations and thanks for everybody joining. Now let's go over a few housekeeping items, please. So we would like to have a very active and dynamic conversation, but please mute yourself if you're not speaking. If you're speaking, well, if you're there, please add your name and affiliation and let us know who you are when you speak up. Hold questions, please, until the Q&A, which is the second half of this event. Presentations and discussions will be recorded, not the Q&A. Chatham House rules apply, and we will share the slides after this. Now, let's move on to the thematic deep dive presentations and the panel. I'm very happy to, I'm very excited to have two panelists that will speak to us very much from the innovative financing world. So first we have Salim Yousefzadeh, the co-founder and CEO of Watt EV. And then we have Stephen Joes, hope I pronounced that correctly, the Vice President Strategy and Corporate Development for Fluid Truck. The theme of this is innovative financing. So we hope to examine issues like which factors contribute to the successful implementation of financing models, how can they spur early market growth for zero-emission, medium heavy-duty vehicles and corresponding charging and refueling infrastructure, and what role could the public sector play in advancing all of this? Now, let's look at the objectives of our events. Under the global MOU on zero-emission, medium heavy-duty vehicles, leading nations are now working together to enable 100% zero-emission new truck and bus sales by 2040, with an interim goal of 30% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2030. To support global MOU implementation, engage with prospective MOU signatory countries, the Netherlands and Colstart Drive to Zero are hosting a series now of invitation-only thematic deep dives, of which we have the fifth today. And our goal is to inform policymakers to design policies by connecting countries with leading technology and business expert. This fifth discussion today will center now on innovative financing methods, and we hope, and we are actually confident that this would lead to an accelerated uptake of zero-emission, medium-duty, heavy-duty vehicles. Now, if you come to the next page, so there's a few themes that actually will be with us today, and it's actually three. So first it's about the innovative financing, and it's really great that as a presenters and then on the panel we have a few companies that have been spearheading models such as truck as a service, which would aiming at reducing entry barriers for fleet operators, and they can work as a leasing model for assets and include charging infrastructure access. And the whole idea is because of the fact that the upfront cost capex for electric vehicles is a lot higher, so capex can be converted to opex. The opex is actually, as we know from TCO models, opex in electric vehicles is a lot lower. So innovative financing model is the first topic. The second topic is de-risking, because in addition to the hard cost, there are risks which are associated with higher cost of capital for the initial capex. And there's tailored mechanisms around which are proven, like loan loss reserves, residual value guarantees, because obviously it's a risk and a concern. What is the value of the battery after so many years? And these tailored de-risking mechanisms can help bring down capital cost and would be crucial to attract private capital. And the third topic is about, I mean, we're talking here to the global MOU countries, public support, not only in regulatory, in progressive regulations, but also when it comes to de-risking, to stepping in and give certainty and reduce risk, country risk, operator risks, regulatory risks, market risk is required to accelerate the uptake. Now, let us move now to the presentations, and we will kick off the thematic deep dive with the presentations from first Salim Yousefzadeh, co-founder and CEO of Watt EV. Then, as I said, Stephen Yoos, Vice President Strategy and Corporate Development at Fluid Trucks. And panelists are Annika Berlin, from Program Officer at calling in from UNEP at Nairobi. And we have Pia Berglund, the Director of Regulatory Affairs from Einride. After this panel, we will happy to take your questions. And I would like to have this actually very engaging and very dynamic. And then please raise your hand virtually. I will be able to see that, and I will call on you. And you, as we said, you need to give us your name and the organization. But now let's first move to the presenters, and I may give the word to Salim from Watt EV. Over to you, Salim.
Great, thank you so much. Great to be here, and happy to share with you guys today what we've been working on at Watt EV and what our vision is. So you should all be able to see the screen now. Yep, so let's go right into it. So Watt EV was created a few years ago with the goal of accelerating the path to zero emissions transport. We have, global visions, but we're starting specifically in California markets because of a number of reasons that I'll get into in a little bit. So to start off with, I think we can all agree that it's not a matter of if, but when the transition to zero emissions would happen. Diesel trucks are the #1 source of pollutants, and we can see that drastically in Southern California, the ports and the Inland Empire, as well as various corridors within California that go from Southern California to Northern California. There's all sorts of sustainability pressures and mandates being enforced in California nationwide. There's various mandates on the warehouses where they're going to get penalized if they don't start adopting towards zero emissions. And then we can see that customers are also looking to get into it, but they may have their own hurdles and bottlenecks. In California specifically, we're seeing high fluctuating costs of diesel. I think diesel is upwards of $6, where years ago was around $4. And then we've got the indirect source rule in Southern California that's starting to penalize warehouses that don't start adopting zero emissions trucks. And then the ports are also looking at adopting a fee if you're not operating a zero emissions vehicle within the port. So these are all various burdens that are impacting both the shippers and the carriers from getting involved in zero emissions transport. We also have the high cost of the trucks. An electric truck, I'm sure you guys all know, is almost 4 times that of a new diesel truck. which is enough to stop a lot of the owner-operators that make up 70% of this industry, as well as the other transporters that are looking to get into this. There's also lack of knowledge in terms of how to navigate the landscape in terms of grants and mandates. There's the range anxiety of the vehicles. So if the high price doesn't stop enough people, there's also range anxiety of where they're going to charge, lack of infrastructure, the unknown residual value, and so forth. So what is it that WattEV does? Well, we give them, the customers, an all-inclusive solution, bringing both publicly available truck charging stations as well as electric trucks as a service. So our starting point is in Southern California, but our solution allows our customers to have access to both the infrastructure and the vehicles, removing all the unknowns and giving the drivers the best use of electric trucks without zero risk. We all know that driving electric trucks is easier on the body, instant acceleration and torque, less noise, and less fumes. So let's look at the network that we're starting to build out. We're starting with 5 sites in California, expanding to other sites in Arizona, New Mexico, with nationwide visions. This is a map that shows our starting point. So we've got 4 sites under construction in Southern California right now, set to go live in 2023. There's going to be a mixture of solar and grid sites. When you look at the infrastructure portion on utilities, there's a huge burden for utilities to start upgrading the lines, or when power would be available at various sites. So some of our locations are going to be islanded operations completely with solar development, which would allow us to become less dependent on the grids and reduce our costs as well. So this is what our Bakersfield site looks like. This is one of our flagship sites. At full scale, would be able to charge 200 trucks per day with a 40 megawatt solar field. This site will be built in stages, with the first stage being 5 megawatts of solar with a combination of CCS chargers. All our sites are built with the future in mind, so they'll have all the conduits and piping in place, so that once MCS charging becomes available, they can switch over to that. So MCS, for some of the audience that doesn't know, is the megawatt charging standards that allows next generation vehicles to charge at much faster rates. Whereas the trucks today are sort of limited to about 250 kilowatts, equating to roughly a 2 to 3 hour charge time. MCS can bring that down to about 30 to 45 minutes. This is our Inland Empire location, about a 4-acre site that will be tied to Southern California Edison. Again, you can see CCS chargers on the outside perimeter, and then the inside would be MCS for opportunity charging. And then the last site I want to show is our Long Beach location, directed right inside the Port of Long Beach. And then this also has CCS and MCS will be built in different phases. The first phase going operational next year. So that's a little bit about the infrastructure piece. There's also the software that ties this all together. On the software, there's different modules to give the shippers complete compliance and summary dashboards where they can see that they're in compliance with the various mandates. They can see exactly how much emissions they're saving. And then for the drivers, they're able to pick up trucks, see their routes, where they're going to charge, and so forth. This is just an example of the amount of emissions reduced on 100 trucks running a 160-mile round trip from Long Beach to Rialto. And our vision is to expand well beyond the first 50 trucks that we have on order getting delivered next year. We're looking to obviously expand much more rapidly and have well over 1,000 trucks within the short few years. So as a summary, we're bringing both the infrastructure and the trucks. On the truck side of things, just to dive into that a little more, we quickly realized that it's not enough to just build infrastructure and expect the demand to pick up naturally. That's when we were looking at the trucks themselves, really diving deeply into seeing what the limitations are, what the bottlenecks are, and came up with a truck as a service concept where we offer a truck all inclusive of the vehicle, maintenance, partial insurance, and the fuel being the energy to get them to their destinations all at a fixed price per month. So this allows them to have zero unknowns, and we give them guaranteed uptime and access to an electric truck and our network. And as we expand, then that short mile range or the hauls can increase beyond the short and middle mile into long haul freight as well. Our visions are obviously to go towards MCS trucks. We're starting with the Volvo Phase 2 trucks, which are 250 kilowatt chargers, but already looking at partners that can help us get to MCS. So thanks again for your time, and looking forward to the questions that come.
Excellent, excellent, Salim. Thanks for the presentation. Next up is Stephen Joes. He is the Vice President Strategy and Corporate Development at Fluid Truck. Stephen, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Christoph, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to present Fluid Truck today. I want to go into Fluid Truck as a whole and provide an overview. Fluid Truck is a mobility platform providing flexible access to commercial vehicles of light and medium duty for SMEs. We're based in the US. We're currently in 64 markets. Primarily, these are ICE vehicles, but we have growing zero emission deployments, which I'm going to talk about here shortly. At the center of everything is our Fluid Truck application, which powers the mobility side of this for 24/7, 365 access to these vehicles to really eliminate the headache and overhead of managing a vehicle, the maintenance and everything that comes along with it. What we find is our customers, the vehicle is really a means to an end, and they just want to get their job done. So our job is to make sure that that happens as efficient as possible. And on the zero emissions side, right, we have a growing number of deployments. We're in 5 markets currently, and we deploy in 2 methods, right? So we have our zero emission mobility, which just like on the ICE side, we provide SMEs fractional access to battery electric vehicles. These vehicles live at Fluid Truck charging hubs where we have level 2 and level 3 charging for these vehicles. And these vehicles can be booked on hourly or daily basis, and they return home to where they're domiciled and charge there. So you can see an example of that at our Denver, Colorado charging hub, where we have a number of Ford F-150 light commercial vehicles for businesses to use. And so what we see is, in addition to borrowers using these vehicles to get their jobs done, we see small businesses trying these vehicles out in their operations for a day or so to see what it's like. Like Salim was talking about, the experience of driving an electric vehicle and the excitement that comes along with that, right? So and then the operational integration. So we want to grow these hubs and offer this and eventually transition our current fleet that we have on the ICE side into zero emission. And we have a plan for that. And there's some challenges on the policy side, which I'll get into next. Then we have electrification as a service. So this is, where our platform really shines, right? So this is truck as a service, where there's a dedicated zero emission vehicle for our customers. This our application powers that multi-tenancy of the vehicle. So we see that there are, in the example here of the IKEA zero emission vehicle here, they want a great experience at the doorstep for their customers. And when you've got a rumbly, loud, smoke billowing diesel truck that delivers your furniture or your packages, it reduces that experience and within the community. And so our model allows for that zero emission vehicle to be made available to brands and businesses. The key thing here is that vehicle is shared amongst multiple parties. I'm going to get into that here shortly. And then with the electrification as a service, we facilitate charging and infrastructure implementation and behind the fence implementations at our customers' sites as well. So I think the key thing here is the multi-tenancy and what the Fluid Truck platform empowers for small and medium-sized businesses is that one vehicle can be shared by multiple parties. So it can be multiple businesses accessing that vehicle, like we see with our mobility hub here in Denver, Colorado, or in the dedicated model, you have one vehicle being accessed by multiple, in the last mile case, multiple carrier partners as an organization. So, you have multiple drivers each day operating that vehicle, or, one driver today, a different organization the following day. And so you increase the utilization of that vehicle with multiple use cases across the day part. We see, the actual case and really focusing on the end here, the driver, right? That these vehicles are typically not operated by single drivers or single organizations. So if you give them a platform to share that vehicle, you again reduce the need for those vehicles and the OpEx, right? This is an OpEx versus CapEx cost, right? Where SMEs have credit challenges with the high costs of EVs and stuff like that. With that one-to-one relationship that a lot of the infrastructure and the models that are out there are configured for, you have one driver, one electric vehicle. When you have that multi-tenancy of the vehicle, you really lead to a more efficient fleet operation. So as we've been in this space now for 2 years. We launched December 2020, providing commercial electric vehicles in the US. And so, pieces of feedback and things that we've seen on the policy side is that the majority of these grants, credits, subsidies are focused on single tenancy, right? So one owner, one operator. And truck sharing models like ours are not eligible for these sort of funds. And same on the EV infrastructure side, right? So since we have two models, we have, the private behind the fence implementation. And then while our chargers are publicly accessible, they're dedicated to Fluid Truck. So in many cases, we're not able to access some of that funding. We have been successful in Colorado. Shout out to Drive Clean and the Department of Energy here, and Excel, the utility here in Colorado, have been working with us, and they're great partners. So if we look to the future, the areas of opportunity are, supporting this sharing model, right? Multi-tenancy of the vehicle, truck sharing, and then allowing for public access of public chargers for fleets, right? In some of our implementations, we saw where a public entity allowed for us to have access to these charging and infrastructure. There was a NIMBY, not in my backyard. Even though these were zero-emission vehicles, they were still commercial. And we were unable to use the public charging infrastructure because there was opposition to having those commercial vehicles, even though, again, they were zero emissions. So Yeah, so that's just a quick overview of Fluid Truck and how we're implementing across the U.S. For zero emission, and we're focused on mobility and multi-tenancies. So really appreciate the time to speak with you all. Back to you, Christoph.
Yeah, excellent. Very good, Stephen. Yeah, so great to have two presenters from the US, one with a view from California, the other one from Colorado. Next, we go to our distinguished panel. And we first have, I would like to invite Annika Berlin, and obviously we changed scenery a little bit. So Annika, you are program officer in the Sustainable Mobility Unit at UNEP, I guess calling in from Nairobi. And so you have seen conversion of towards zero emission or low carbon transport in many geographies. And including the adoption of electric vehicles. So my first question to you is, do you see also from an emerging market perspective, opportunity and potential for near-term ramp up of electric commercial vehicles in emerging markets? And what would be specific barriers for achieving that?
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot, Christoph, for the introduction and for having me on the panel. And yeah, I think this side of the world, everything looks a bit more different than in the US. Yeah, because I'm calling in from Kenya. And I mean, while I think there's definitely, of course, opportunities like this with everything, I think discussion here is very much at the moment focused on, if we speak about heavy duty vehicles, about buses, which is easier to electrify, and because also we have more models available. But I think the main challenge in the electrification of commercial vehicles in mainly Africa, but also other emerging markets, is that most of the vehicles are used vehicles. So when they enter the market, they already have run for like 12 years or so on the roads in Europe or in Japan, meaning that their upfront cost is even lower. So usually you have to compare a new electric truck with a used ICE truck. So the upfront cost difference is a lot larger, and there's no financing for this. So I think that's why if we talk about bigger trucks, this is still a few years ahead. But I think what we at the UN therefore do is that we still focus on how to improve the vehicles that come into these countries, right, through fuel economy standards, emission standards, and so forth. And this, I think, is like the bridge basically towards electrification, because then, of course, we ensure that there is the vehicles here, and we achieve the same, no? Air quality improvements, reduction of CO2 emissions by cleaner ICE vehicles, and then kind of enable later a transition to electrification, where on the other side, besides technology, also the transformation of the sector is important, because many operators are very small, one truck, one man shows, where also there needs to be sort of aggregation of demand, right? And I think some of these tools maybe developed in the US can eventually also, I think this whole as a service model is very relevant to the context here, right? Because not every operator will be able to buy an electric truck, but then of course, if these vehicles can be available through a financing mechanism, an SPV that can purchase these vehicles and then lease them to operators, I think that's a model that would maybe be more feasible once we start seeing this. But of course, there's also other infrastructure issues that we have to address, such as reliability of electricity. I can say from my own experience at the moment in East Africa, we have many power cuts. And I think especially if we look at commercial operations, where it's important that you can ensure a smooth and reliable operation, then it's important to also think about how to strengthen the grid infrastructure in these markets. But yeah, maybe I'll leave it at this for now, but happy to continue talking about this. I think you're on mute, Christoph.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for this perspective. Maybe a brief follow-on question. So, I mean, having worked in India for many years, so obviously here the electrification in transport starts on the basically lower side. So like you got the two-wheelers, the three-wheelers, the buses. But there's already quite an intense ecosystem for the for the last mile vehicles, yeah, so the light duty vehicles. So how can you, would you say this is India different or specific for emerging economies, and or do you see this elsewhere already popping up, and models like what the colleagues from What EV and Fluid Trucks actually introduced applicable in economies that you're working in?
Yeah, definitely. I think the last mile and the smaller vehicles are definitely ready to be electrified, and we see many startups coming up with like different vehicles, because I see, for example, we had a pilot running where we would import electric three-wheelers from India, but we realized, okay, in many African countries, the conditions are different. So you need products that are suitable for the local context. So it cannot be like copy-paste from what happens in China and India. And that's why it's very important to work with local companies to develop vehicles that are suitable for the conditions. For example, if we talk about rural areas, right, it's completely different than if you talk about urban areas. And then also, what is the type of cargo that we're loading? In many places, for example, in Nairobi, like I had got a fridge recently, it came on a motorbike, right? So usually those type of vehicles are not made for this. So I think it's very important to strengthen the local ecosystem, to develop vehicles that are suitable for the market. And then, of course, also putting in place regulations and policies that can incentivize this, right? Through, on the one side, financing, but also restriction on the import of, let's say, old ICE vehicles, and then also tax incentive, of course, lowering the cost of lithium-ion batteries, which in many emerging markets are still taxed at 50%. And of course, this makes the upfront cost even higher. So I think that's also some, but I definitely agree that the last mile and the three-wheelers for cargo will be now the main mode of electrification at the beginning.
Yeah, excellent. So I think Catherine from C40 is super excited about your fridge being delivered on a motorbike. I had a conversation actually 2 weeks ago with the in India that actually the amount of cargo coming via basically motorbikes is actually strong, is rising a lot. So I'd like to bring in Pia Berglund from Einride. Pia, we had the chance to actually to do one of the closing panels at the COP, and I found actually it was a very inspired conversation there, also about finance, and I actually really liked your presentation and the business model. Maybe you can tell the audience here a bit more about what is actually the essence of Einride's business and service model. How would it differentiate from what we heard so far? And what is which customers are you targeting?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me again. I'm so happy that I get to participate in these kind of conversations. And I must say, it was a very enlightening start that I see I should actually call them colleagues that have trucks as service. I think this is really needed, that we have these new players in the right room. So Einride was created 6 years ago only, started off as what if. So what if we took all the sort of big challenges or opportunities that we have, electrification, digitalization, and automation at once. And then, of course, we would end up what probably we are most known for, the autonomous electric heavy-duty vehicle that you see behind me. And I think that we have deployed that since 2019, also on public road, but to scale, and the founders of Einride was very keen to sort of, that's why we picked the area of heavy duty vehicles, because we know 7% of the world's emissions comes from that. So we want to make sure that we start in heavy duty vehicles. And by doing that, we also deploy then manned electric trucks. But as the other players today, we offer a service. So we are turning to the big players, most of the global players that you can see. Maersk is one of them, but also Lidl. We have some breweries coming this week. We're launching in Benelux tomorrow, and others, customer close brand marks, and they have picked us because we are a full service, one-stop shop. We own our trucks, we own the chargers, and the drivers that we have in the manned trucks will drive for us, but there will be local carriers that we have in the system. So we build what we call a grid. So we have the trucks and we build chargers. I think in Europe as well as in the US now, I think we have some what could be the biggest electrification system going in both continents. And so we are scaling at large, but with customers. I think that's maybe the difference here. That so we actually, when we got the customer, I can use Lidl, that was one of our first. We don't really want to know where they're transporting today. That will be biased. So we want their data. So we use big data, put it into an AI computer. So we are actually registered as a software company, even if we run trucks. And then we look at that with them, with the customer, and we know that we can almost always start to electrify 50% of the transport needs of that company if we pinpoint, if we cherry pick. So I think that's one thing I wanted to say, that many people always talk about the most difficult places where to electrify. Let's not start there. Let's start where it's easy to electrify. So if we have enough volume in one place to actually allow for having a charger there, and actually allow for having a net of trucks. So we know, and we heard it earlier today, that the electrified transport system is another system. It has very little to do with the analog diesel system. So you will drive in a different way. As we heard, the trucks are 4 times more expensive. So you need to utilize them better. I mean, so we are going maybe from utilization of 40, 50% in the truck up to 80, 90. And in that way, you get the business model. That's how you get it. And when we put up a charger, we have one then with Lidl in Stockholm. That's the most used charger in Europe. And that's only because we plan it well, computer-based planning. All the actors have all they need in the system. But because we have to consider also the heavy-duty logistics system today is not very well utilized. It's quite inefficient, of course, due to the low margins in that business. So I think by using data as our core, we can offer electric transport, you know, at a good price, on time. Actually, the efficiency raises also with quality. And so we can do it almost cost paritative because we plan it so much better together with the customer. So that's how we go about. And I think that's why this big customer actually chose to us instead of an ordinary trucking company, is that they don't have to think about this. They buy transport as a service from us, or even mobility as a service, we try to call it. And we solve everything for them. They don't have to think about it anymore. The only thing they have to think about where to electrify next after where they started. So, and of course we want to go autonomous as well and offer that, because that will even make, it suits very well with electrification actually in heavy duty vehicles. So that's the next phase in our development. So I think I stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Pia. I missed 1 minute because of connectivity, so I do remember your great presentation in Egypt already. So the question that I would have is your model actually catering to basically large fleets, individual customers, or do you also bring basically different customers onto one platform and share the use of you know, across time and space? So do you have this, what I mean, we heard earlier today, kind of a sharing platform as well, or is that not your model?
It could be definitely, because we're looking at grids, and it's well explained on our website how that looks. So we can have a grid New York, grid Brussels, for example. But we are not like, you cannot book yourself with us. We produce transport as a service for those customers in our system. And of course, then we could mix. But for the moment, we are quite, you know, keen on delivering at a good price. So we need also to sort of plan it in that way that we can deliver to that customer. So I think the customer we're looking at have, you know, very precise transport needs between warehouses, between stores, is quite known. And that's excellent for electrification. It's like a known need. So we know how to plan that, of course. But I wanted to add also that it seems like now everything is going very well. Of course it is, but we are, I think, what we believe the biggest buyer of electric truck. We think in the world, but we don't know that much about China, but otherwise we know we are the biggest buyer of electric trucks. And we are struggling to get trucks. So we have a bigger demand for transportation than we can actually offer today due to the lack of electric trucks on the market. So even if we have this sort of big vision and big ambitions with customers, we still are struggling to get enough trucks out on the market.
Yeah, so you're exactly coming to the next question that I wanted to get to you is, so you would say there's actually a lot more demand than supply in this. I mean, when I'm talking to OEMs and we did so 2 weeks ago, so they were basically saying, well, if we had a clearer order book, yeah, so if the demand would be more explicit and aggregated, then we could actually ramp up a lot faster. Is that in line with your conversations with the OEMs, or what needs to be done in order to basically
so I'm not here to shame them. Of course, that would not be very polite because we like to buy from them. So anyone that has a big stock of electric trucks, call me. It basically, I think, if you look at into the numbers, and even the numbers, the way it produced is like 2030, they're going to have 70%. We want to electrify 50% of trucks this year, next year. That's not possible. They're very late in that cycle. So they're very much leaning towards 2030. So, and of course, I understand where they're coming from, with their business model. But I mean, I think at least policymaker needs to be aware of this fact. It's not very easy to get the trucks. And the resist is the constant dialogue on, but the charger are not there. That's not really what we are feeling, and I'm happy with the presentation earlier on that we take responsibility for that. We are building our own charging network, and we will take responsibility for that. So the OEMs doesn't have to necessarily be too sort of, in our mind at least for Enride, concerned about that we will solve that. As long as they can only bring us the electric trucks on the market. And of course, we then fit them with our technique. As you said, we are offering on the digital platform also. So we all connected them to the same sort of AI computer system. So we buy the electric truck, fit them with our AI brain, and then on the road, and then they're part of our bigger grid system. So more trucks needed, and that's with some concern. Actually, I see some countries are not aligned on the numbers they have for funding for charging and funding for trucks. Some have more on trucks and some have less on charging. I think you need to be very well balanced there. So I mean, even my home country as well, that you need to balance it a bit. So otherwise, you might end up having your charger, no trucks, or the other way around. So make sure you balance them. And for the policymakers, Enride has a recommendation of 5 things you should think about when you set up a funding system. And we're happy to share that with anyone. It's not just biased, hopefully. We've been on the market for quite some while, and we looked at 12 different countries, their subsidies. And we're happy to share our knowledge on that with anyone that'd like to hear on things to think about when you set up a subsidy system to get a balanced and quite quick rollout of electric vehicles on the road.
Yeah, thank you, Pia. So let me just go back to bring in Salim and Stephen to the panel. So we heard earlier from them, and Salim, I've seen you target 12,000 e-trucks in 2030. So that's actually that's a good ramp up. So what's your projection? I assume that would be across US or even beyond. So what market share would that give you in your calculations, and how is that demand supply dynamics that Pia was talking about? How do you see that? I mean, is it true that demand is ramping up quickly and you can't supply, or do you have to do a lot of education and convincing
Sure. Yeah, so when you look at how many electric, if you look at the marketplace right now, I think there's only a few 100,000 diesel trucks that are sold every year. So 12,000 trucks is a very small percentage of that. It's a drop in the bucket, really. But it's a needed first step to getting there. And the reason why we're starting in Southern California is because we know that the demand is there. We know that the freight is there. The mandates and incentive and grants are all there. So that's a great starting point for us. But to touch on the availability of the trucks, yeah, we have seen supply chain issues with the trucks, but more than that, we've seen struggles on infrastructure as well, pushing utilities to upgrade the line. So there's all sorts of hurdles that we've had to face along the way. But we're not the only ones going through this, and we're still very set on getting our sites operating next year, as well as getting our first 50 trucks. For us, though, we see that the needed step to going towards mass adoption is to go towards MCS charging, right? So all the trucks that we've purchased so far, with the exception of Volvos that we have on reservation without unknown delivery dates, is that we have CCS charging. But our charging equipment that we're putting on our sites are built with the future in mind. We are taking into consideration how we can make the equipment better so that we can be future-proof, where we start with CCS, and then as MCS becomes available, we can add those MCS to those stations. And we are working with various OEMs with placing large orders with the goal of getting towards MCS.
Maybe for our audience, can you elaborate a little bit why this is critical?
Sure.
And,
why
are you focusing on that?
Right. So if you look at the charge rate, 2 to 3 hour downtime isn't really acceptable in most operations today. Right. At the end of the day, time is money for these drivers, and they can't afford to sit there and wait for the truck to charge. A normal break for a trucker is 30 to 45 minutes, which fits with MTS charging. And also to go beyond the short and middle mile and get to long haul freight, you can't really use CCS trucks. It doesn't really become a viable option if I want to go 1,000+ miles and have to wait 2 to 3 hours every time I need to charge. And that's one of the reasons why we see that MCS becomes so crucial, right? So in the short and middle mile, we're able to make it work with current generation trucks because we're really identifying the routes, really, doing a lot of hand-holding with the transporters and shippers to show that it is possible with current generation. But to get to mass adoption, get to that, wide-scale deployment, we see MCS becoming crucial.
Excellent, very good. Let me also bring in Stephen. I mean, you talked about Colorado, and for me, it's I think the numbers, the commitments are big until 2030, 30%. So if you translate that into numbers, that's really a fast ramp up. So what is in your mind, what would you point out as the key bottlenecks in scaling? So we heard the infrastructure, synchronization of ramp up infrastructure. We heard the basic charging rates, so to enable operating models. So from your business models, service model, so what is this key bottleneck in order to scale fast?
Yeah, definitely. And, Colorado is just our mobility hub. We have deployments and we're doing zero emission. We have zero emission vehicles in 5 markets currently throughout the US, East Coast, Texas, Colorado, and West Coast. And across that, the challenges we've seen, and I'll go infrastructure and then the vehicle side, right, is, obviously we want our entire fleet to become zero emission, and that is our goal, and as we slowly convert over, but infrastructure is our challenge, right? Every vehicle needs a place to park and charge, right? And what we see right now is the duty cycle around 6 hours, but we know that that's going to shrink. And like Salim was talking about with MCS movement, we need to be able to support that, faster charging with, which really enables our model of multi-tenancy of the vehicle, right? So if you have a dwell time of 6 hours, that works great for overnight, but if you have multiple users throughout the day, that doesn't work. So infrastructure, if we converted our entire fleet, looking at the calculations, we would consume as much energy as a large city. So that requires significant planning on our part and partnerships with utilities. And you know, our fleet isn't as big as many others, right? So if you think about that and multiply that out, infrastructure becomes a very, very large problem. And then on the vehicle side, you know, what we see, the big challenges is payload, right? So if you look at IKEA, you know, in addition to parcels and you know, lighter weight packages, you know, they're delivering kitchens and closets, and you look at you know, yeah, exactly. So payload is the big challenge, right? You can build an electric vehicle with a very large box to accommodate, right? But if it only accommodates 2,000 pounds, you know, you need more vehicles, right? And the costs are you know, out of control. So you know, we're really looking for advances in battery technology to extend that range and extend that payload for commercial vehicles to really be able to capture those main use cases.
Right. Yeah. So we let us bring in the audience already. Yeah. So and because I'm receiving a few questions here. So first, actually, before moving to the questions, I'd like to recognize, I mean, we showed the charts of the global MOU countries. So, and specifically, I would like to call out that Denis Radiuk from Ukraine, and Ukraine joined as a country also before COP. So, and I think in these days, a lot of solidarity with Ukraine, and it's glad that you keep up the spirit here. So I just want to make sure that we recognize that. And then let me bring in the question from Otto Frommelt from Liechtenstein.